Hello, everyone. My talk today will focus on agricultural water management under changing climate. And I will give you a few words about the ICID, the International Commission on Irrigation and Drainage, that was established in 1950 and was at the forefront of the Green Revolution after World War II. ICID is a leading scientific, technical, and professional, not-for-profit or international organization working in the field of irrigation, drainage, flood management to promote and achieve sustainable agricultural water management. ICID is also dedicated towards improving the status of agricultural water management practices, including rainfed agriculture, supplementary irrigation, deficit irrigation, and full irrigation. ICID other core activities focus on the drainage of agricultural lands and the management of extreme climate events such as flood and droughts. The current challenges that really we are facing now is by 2050, the world population is expected to increase from 6 to 9 billion, and subsequently the food demand is expected to increase by 70 to 100%. Water consumption is expected to increase by 50%. By 2030, a 40% overall gap between global water supply and demand is expected, and climate change predicted increased vulnerability of the agricultural sector in developing countries. So the impact of the climate change on agriculture, too much water can cause flood, and that has a negative effect on crop growth. Too much water, too little water could cause drought, and that would also have a negative effect on crop growth. Extreme conditions of gales, heat waves, cold also negatively affect the crop growth and agricultural production. And the predicted actually impact of climate change in terms of food, there is a chance that will be a falling yields in many developing countries. And in terms of water, significant decrease in water availability in many areas in the world. And also we will expect more droughts and flood events. The UK has been getting more frequently drought events recently than in the past. The 1976 droughts followed by several drought events and in a very short period of time. So the frequency of really drought is getting more and more, and severity as well of the drought. And we have seen also flood events in this year in 2021 in Europe, in Germany, Belgium, and Luxembourg. And we have seen some really events how, like 1976 drought, how affected the water supply to households, where people had to queue in the streets of London really to get water from stand pipes. California currently also facing drought, and also since 2009, and that drought actually affected the water resources availability and food production. In the UK, we had a study to look at the different impacts of the climate change, especially the drought events. And we had 7 catchments from Scotland in the north to another catchments in Cornwall, Fowey. And those 7 catchments were really studied for the impact of climate change, especially drought events. This is example from the Don catchments in the Midlands near Sheffield city. And we have been looking at the impact of climate change from 2020 up to 2099, and the impact on stream flow, especially during summertime where we need to irrigate crops, is really decreasing with the emission level and also with time. The same as well for the groundwater recharge. So we expect to have less groundwater available with increasing the emission and with time. And at the same time, soil moisture deficit is likely to increase. Evaporation also will increase. And when evaporation increases, it means that we need to add more water for irrigation. Also, we have been looking at the drought events, severity, and the frequency, and also we could see in that example that the frequency and the the severity is also increasing with time. And we looked at the gap between water supply and the demand, and we can find here the gap is actually increasing with time in that catchment. And we found the same in other 6 catchments, apart from the Scotland, where the gap was actually a lot narrower than the other catchments. We also looked at the impact of climate change on seawater inundation in several sites around the UK. And there were 3 sites actually were vulnerable to the seawater inundation, and that had a negative impact on the marshlands and the areas of the lowlands around the coastal line. We also looked at the climate change and its impact on the growth periods of crops and the crop water requirements. And this is an example here for amaranth crop, where the season would be shortened by 16 days by 2095 under high emission scenarios. Possible approaches to deal with the impact of climate change during flood periods, high river flows, especially we could allow farmers to harvest and abstract and store water in reservoirs for later use, increasing water supply during the rainfall events, and by rainfall harvesting, use of non-conventional water resources, increasing water use efficiency, accurate estimation of crop water requirements, precision irrigation and precision agriculture, use of non-conventional water resources like brackish, treated wastewater, and saline water, use of non-conventional, less water consuming drought and salinity tolerant crops, use of management models to optimize the impact, the input of water and fertilizers. So we can actually increase the water supply by allowing the runoff to go through certain holes to recharge the aquifer, and the aquifer actually could work as storage for water use later on. Also, we can harvest the water into surface reservoirs like these mountain lakes, and also we could cover these reservoirs, like that reservoir here in Berkshire in the UK, with a floating solar panel to minimize the losses by evaporation from those reservoirs. We could also use more efficient irrigation system that would actually minimize the losses by evaporation or wind drift, and that, like those ones, low nozzles, center pivot, or sprinklers, that would actually save 30% of the water used. We can also use a drip irrigation system, and subsurface would actually be a good saver for water. And this is here example of another system that we use twin drip lines, and the plant is in the middle, and we irrigate with one drip line at a time, and we alternate. So we irrigate half of the root zone at a time. And that would save actually 26% compared to the traditional drip irrigation, and 44% water saving compared to sprinkler. So if we could use that partial root drying twin drip lines and subsurface, which 10 to 12 centimeter below the surface. Also can increase the water supply by agricultural drainage water use, brackish groundwater, wastewater, treated, untreated, domestic, industrial, mining water, breweries, food packaging industry, sugar industry, fish farming, wastewater. This is an example of irrigating cherry tomatoes using saline water. And also we could use the aquaculture by using the water of the fish farms and irrigate with that water cereals. The other thing also we could use in situ and decentralized small scale wastewater treatment, and can be treated to the level that can be used to irrigate, especially for small communities. Also, selection of crops. We can encourage the use of less water consuming crops. Drought tolerant crops, salinity tolerant crops, the use of rotation of deep and shallow rooted crops, heat and cold tolerant crops, and wind tolerant crops. In the UK, we have been trying here a quinoa, which is a drought and salt-tolerant crops, and has been really growing quite well. Using of models can help us to predict the long-term impact of using any management in terms of water, in terms of fertilizers, in terms of salinity or saline water. And there are some publications, and it's free download from ICID website. And also we can minimize the water use by accurately estimating the crop water requirements. And here we use in our experiments the eddy covariance in kilometers to calculate the actual evapotranspiration, and that's equivalent to the crop water requirements. And also we use the Cosmos to determine the integrated soil moisture and soil moisture deficit, and the soil moisture deficit can be used as indication of the crop water requirements. And here we can see that we can save 50% of water when we measure the actual evaporation using these instruments compared to the classical methods, which depend mainly on equations. And the Cosmos here, we can see from the Cosmos experiments that we can have a good and accurate estimate of the soil moisture deficit, and we can give it color code. If it's green, we don't need to irrigate. If it's red, so we irrigate with amount as indicated by soil moisture deficit. Also, we have to minimize the use of water for biofuel, as biofuel crops are faster growing crops and taking the areas of food production. Thank you very much for your listening. Thank you. Bye for now.